everybody, and welcome back to Sorry I Missed This, the show where we talk about ADHD and all things intimacy, relationships, and communication. And today we are talking about ending relationships with ADHD coach and author of I Don't Hate My Ex-Husband, Jess DuBose. Now, Jess DuBose literally wrote the book on breaking up with people, which I think is absolutely fantastic because breaking up can be overwhelming. It can be challenging to find where to start, how to have those conversations, how to unpack. And so I'm so excited to bring this conversation to you, dear listener, today. Now, before we start, I do want to just very quickly say that Jess and I are going to have a conversation about what I will call healthy relationships. We are not talking about relationships where there is abuse or manipulation or anything like that. And so if you are in a relationship that is dangerous or harmful, we're going to link some resources in the show notes. But I just wanted to make that very clear that we're not talking about ending bad relationships here. We're talking about ending relationships that are no longer serving, but in which two people care about each other and just might need to move on. With that being said, I'm so excited to introduce you to Jess DuBose. Get ready for this episode of Sorry I Missed This. Welcome back. Here we go. Let's talk about breaking up with your partner. All right. Hi, Jess.
Hi.
Today we are talking about breakups and ADHD. And I have so many questions for you. But number one, how did it come to be that you wrote a book about ending relationships with ADHD?
That's a really great question because it's kind of multiple stories combined into one. So the first one is that I was married and now I'm divorced, and I wrote a book called I Don't Hate My Ex-Husband. While I don't explicitly talk about ADHD throughout the book, it is very evident that it's there because my ex-husband has ADHD. As I was getting into like coaching and learning about who I was going to coach in my business, I had a couple of roommates who were like, when are you doing your ADHD workshop? And I was like, why would I do that? I don't have ADHD myself. And then I started to see how I was teaching them and some other people in my life about ADHD. And I was like, oh, I also have a degree in education. And I had a professor in college who did an ADHD simulation. I walked into the classroom like it was a normal day and things were being really strange. Like the lights kept getting turned on and off. There was vacuuming in the hallway. People were like sneezing excessively loudly in class and getting up to throw trash away. There was even an Aflac duck that kept going off. Aflac, Aflac, like while we're trying to learn. And then the professor was going faster and faster and faster through the slides. And I remember like throwing my pen on the table and crossing my arms and being like, I can't learn. I don't know what's happening. Then he paused and he said, people with ADHD, it's not that they can't pay attention. It's that they pay attention to everything. And this was like 2008. So the only thing I had known about ADHD at that point was like, can't sit still, can't pay attention. So that reframe was really powerful for me. So anytime I met somebody with ADHD, I would just ask them a million questions because I'm so fascinated how our brains can work so differently. And as a result, I started collecting ADHDers in my life. Subsequently, my husband, ex-husband now, and we're still friends.
This is going to be such a fun episode. I'm really excited for this episode because we are tackling what a lot of people I think would consider a challenging and maybe even kind of scary topic, which is ending relationships. So my first question for someone who might be listening to this podcast and going, how would ADHD affect breaking up? What are you even talking about, Kate? Like, Jess, can you speak to that? Like, how might ADHD impact breakup or the end of a relationship?
There are so many ways in which ADHD can affect breaking up. One of them is like rumination and overthinking. Also, ADHDers this is not for everyone, but tend to be people pleasers. And so they're just trying to make everyone happy, and ending a relationship is going to make someone unhappy, likely. And so I want to make sure that they're good and I'm good, but I don't know how to do that. Or am I just crazy and wrong? And so there's like this overthinking thing that happens. We talk about like rejection sensitivity dysphoria of like, I don't want to be rejected, but I have found that ADHDers don't want to do the rejecting either because they understand empathetically how awful it is to be rejected. And so rejecting someone else is that much harder.
Well, okay, this might be a spicy hot question, but it sounds to me, at least, like some people with ADHD might stay in a relationship that is not serving them or is not making them happy out of that sort of fear of people pleasing, rejection, sensitivity. And so I wonder, as an ADHD coach, like, how do you help someone through that? What would you do or say to that person if they were staying in a relationship just because they didn't want to hurt anybody's feelings?
Yeah.
Which I have done, by the way. I want to be so honest. Like, before you even start, like, I have absolutely done that. I have been in bad relationships where I was like, I'll stay for, like, I just don't want to hurt his feelings.
You cannot control someone's perception of you, period.
Mm-hmm.
At the end of the day, the person that you're breaking up with is going to have feelings, and they get to have feelings about it.
Mm-hmm.
Trying to get away from the uncomfortable, what we deem as negative feelings, is actually not helping anyone, including yourself. Those people-pleasing tendencies are often stemming from something you were taught or a traumatic situation that happened in your life, because it's what had kept you safe at that time. And so then our body continues to be like, okay, this is what works to keep us safe, so we're going to keep doing that same thing because that's how we create safety. But even when we're out of those traumatic things or abusive situations or whatever, we carry that into, well, I'm actually safe now, but I don't know how to do life any different. And so we have to go through this process of like changing the pattern.
Mm-hmm.
I heard this really cool thing one time. Like, when we create patterns, it's like going down a path that's already been created. So if you go down the sidewalk at the park, this path has already been created and it's easy to walk on. But when we're creating a whole brand new path, there's trees and bushes and thorns all in the way, and you have to literally chop it up to create a new path. And you're like, it's just easier to go down the sidewalk, so I'm just going to keep repeating the same pattern instead of forging through. So it's a conscious effort. The thing about this is that it takes a lot of time to like embody this. Like, I actually created this whole thing called the growth process. And because what ends up happening is, like, when people start going down this path of growing, it's easy to get stuck or to stop because you're not seeing the progress and you're not doing it perfectly the first time. So you would never expect yourself to learn how to play the flute in one day. You're definitely not going to unlearn programmed behaviors in one day. We're talking about people pleasing. That's like this thing that we've trained our being to do. And so when we're moving away from that, there's this growth that happens. So the acronym I created is ASPIRE.
Good acronym.
The first is awareness. So you have to be aware that you're doing the people pleasing. And then you get to choose to make a shift if you want to. So you're like, okay, I'm going to not people please anymore. I'm going to start shifting.
Mm-hmm.
And then the moment that you fuck it up again, because you're aware of the problem now, you might stop. And that's where P for persist happens. You have to persist and keep going.
Okay.
And then I is interrupt. When you find that you're people pleasing again, when you notice it, sometimes it happens in the middle of it, sometimes it happens afterwards, but then you interrupt the pattern somehow. And then you just repeat this process over and over again, R, and then until you get to E, which is embody. And then you will have created the desired path and you won't have to think about it anymore. You're just doing the new pattern.
It's a really useful acronym. I love a good acronym. So what I want to do is I want to sort of take this idea of these steps of ASPIRE and apply them to, say, processing through or moving through a relationship that you realize is maybe no longer serving you. One thing that I do want to say, sort of like going into this part of the podcast, is that Jess and I are talking about ending relationships that are, not working. We're not talking about abusive relationships. We're not talking about manipulative relationships. We're not talking about things where there's like really unhealthy and really bad stuff going on. This is more for, just how would you sort of name that type of relationship versus like a really unhealthy relationship? Do you know what I'm asking, kind of?
Yeah, it's like, it's a relatively healthy relationship and you care about one another. You probably love this person. But you just recognize that for whatever reason, you don't want to be in the relationship anymore, or you're growing apart, or like there could be a myriad of reasons, but it's not the like abusive or toxic situation that we're referring to right now.
This might be a big question, and I don't know how many hours you have to answer it. But how do we, what are the tools that we could use to, if we're maybe questioning a relationship or saying, I'm not sure if this relationship is going to work out long term, or I'm not sure if this is serving us. Like, what are the things that we use or look at or talk ourselves through in order to sort of determine whether or not the next step is ending a relationship?
Understanding and knowing like very clearly for yourself whether you want to be in a relationship is not an easy thing to be asking yourself, especially depending on how long you've been with this person. So one of the tools that I love to use with my clients, I call them transition exercises, but they're like mini meditation or mini visualization exercise. So if you're open to it, we could try one right now in regards to breaking up.
Okay. I would just like to say on the record for any of my partners who are listening to this, we're good, but we're just going to do it. Okay.
Because the visualization is actually going to make this clear. Great.
Okay. Okay. Let's do it. Let's go.
Ask, and everybody who's listening can join us too. So if you are in a spot where you can like settle in and close your eyes, I would recommend that if you are open to it.
I feel weird closing my eyes on my own podcast. I don't know why. It feels like I'm being lazy or something.
Take a deep breath. Take another deep, slow breath. Biggest breath you've taken all day. And as you continue to take deep breaths, you're going to tap into the energy of yourself, connecting to yourself. Settling into this now moment. And then you're going to picture your partner. See them, hear them, smell them. And notice how your being feels in that space. There's no right or wrong answer, and we're not trying to change anything right now. We're just taking observation notes. Notice what's going on in your head. Notice what's going on in your chest. Notice what's going on in your gut. And then imagine yourself staying. Has anything shifted in your body? Did your chest tighten? Did you feel like you got punched in the gut? Did your heart expand? Did you smile? Just notice what's happening as you're visualizing being with this person. And staying with this person. Take another deep breath. And now you're going to imagine yourself walking away. And this is not just walking away to another room. This is walking away and saying goodbye. The person is behind you. You're walking out the door. You said all of the goodbyes. You've already had the hard conversation. And then you're going to notice now what's going on in your body. Notice what's going on in your head. Notice what's going on in your chest. Notice what's going on in your gut. Again, there's no right or wrong answer. There's no judgment of the response that your body did or did not have. Take another deep breath. And open your eyes when you're ready. There's probably something that shifted in your body one way or the other, but most of the time we're not super connected to our body. Our society doesn't teach us to be connected to ourselves. And so just those little things might give you an indication of whether it's time to leave or not.
That was amazing. But that was the most relaxed I've ever been in my entire life. But so then the next question is, let's say we've checked in with ourselves, we've done a lot of thinking, and maybe it is time. Maybe it is time to leave this relationship. How do we do it in a way that supports ourselves and the other person? Like, I love that you talk so openly about being friends with your ex-husband. How did you manage to stay friends? Like, what was the process like? What can we learn from that process?
Well, first, I want to say that being friends with an ex is not for every relationship. I am not friends with all of my exes. I am friends with my ex-husband. So you don't have to be friends.
It feels almost like a people pleaser thing to be like, oh, well, we have to stay friends. We have to stay in each other's lives. And it's like, no, like maybe you don't have to, and that's okay. Don't obligate yourself into a relationship that you're not actually ready for or want to take on just for the sake of like being quote unquote nice. You know what I mean?
Exactly. It didn't start off that way. My ex, his name is Morris. Morris and I were not like super buddy when our marriage ended. It was one of the most difficult things in my life that I've ever gone through. It was very hard. I was very angry. I was very sad. And so there was space first. But over time, we started talking, and it was like we could just be friends, and it wasn't like all at once overnight. It took some time to reflect and heal and understand the things that I contributed to negatively to our relationship. And I ended up writing a whole book about it and got to like process through all of that. And it was something that took a while. When we were going through some of the most difficult parts of the ending of our relationship, I was struggling of like, okay, I know this is bad. I know this is not good. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to be. So I actually ended up creating a vision board for myself.
Okay.
While we were married, I was in South Korea and he was in the United States. So it's not like he could see my vision board, just FYI. But there are a few things that I put on there is what I wanted to make sure I did to feel like I put my all into this. A few of the things that I put in there is like, I want real restoration and transformation. It may look different than how I'd imagine it. Let it be so. It will get worse before it gets better. Hold on. How do you want the story to go? Is this the story of how it ends, or is this the story of radical love, excruciating pain, unimaginable strength, and steadfastness that transforms into something far beyond yourself?
I just got goosebumps. That's so nice.
Yeah. And so I did all of the things that I felt like I could do before the relationship ended and we walked away from one another. And what's really cool is it transformed into a friendship. It wasn't an ending, even though it felt like it. That's not going to be everybody's story. But having those things in mind of like, okay, I want to create this ending with love. I understand it's going to be painful. I understand I'm going to have a lot of feelings. How can I support myself through the process? And one of the best things that I did, because I was halfway across the world away from all of my family and friends, I created a group email and I sent it to everyone and I said, I'm going through the hardest time in my life. When you think about me, if you could just email me or text me or reach out to me just to see how I'm doing, I would really appreciate it. And then I had people who would send me cards or check in with me, and like, it was really, really cool the way that my community showed up for me during the hardest time in my life.
That's beautiful. And I think it also speaks to the power of not trying to do everything on your own. Because a breakup can feel very isolating.
Well, there was one moment that was really interesting. After Morris asked for a divorce, I was supposed to be hanging out with his friends in South Korea.
Okay.
He knew them from college, and I hadn't met them in real life, but we had like chatted over Zoom before I moved there. And so I reached out to one of them and I was like, this is what just happened. I think that it would actually be really cool for me to be around people still, but I also know that I'm not going to be a good time. So I totally understand if you don't want to meet up. And they were so loving and kind. And they're like, yes, come, we will do whatever you want. If you want to play games, or we could go get dinner, or we could just sit and cry. Like whatever you need, just come.
That's so lovely.
Yes. It's not easy to ask for what you need. It's so vulnerable to be in that space. But giving people that you love and trust an opportunity to show up for you could be one of the most magical things ever.
I want to talk a little bit more about specifics, especially like when it comes to initiating that conversation, asking for what you need. Maybe the ask is, I would like to break up, or I would like to end this relationship. I would like a divorce, whatever that might look like in someone's circumstances. What are some best practices around those conversations that you can advise us on?
If you're going to have that conversation of breakup, it should not be a surprise to the other person, right? Like if it is a surprise to the other person, that means you haven't been communicating your needs or wants or how you're feeling. And so if you think it might be a surprise for the other person, I would start by having conversations about how you're feeling, not I want to break up. Because maybe you just haven't been asking for what you need and want and haven't been giving this person an opportunity to show up for you. And that's why you're like wanting to leave. So just giving a space of saying, I'm not happy. I feel really lost. I feel really sad, or whatever it is you're feeling, and just sharing that with your partner really openly. Again, this is in the context of a person that is safe to talk to about this. And then if it's not a surprise and you both know that you've been fighting all the time, it's been really tense, you've had conversation after conversation, you want to make sure that the person is in a space to have a conversation. This is probably not going to be a short conversation. So if they're like running in between eating their dinner and going to their pickup soccer game, this is not a good time to pick up the conversation. So just be mindful of timing. And then like ask for what you want. It's really that simple. It sucks, but that's as simple as it gets.
I think though sometimes like embracing the suck has to be like, because breaking up is just so hard. But like, you know, you have learned and you talk about like in your book, it can also be very freeing and very healthy and very clarifying and strengthening. So let's pretend that I am a person with ADHD. Crazy. I know. Like just imagine. Can you imagine? That'd be so crazy. But so I am a person with ADHD. I struggle with people pleasing. I struggle with that kind of rejection sensitivity of, you know, I don't want to feel bad. I don't want other people to feel bad. What is going to be my first step in initiating a conversation to move a relationship in one direction or another?
Do you like to journal? If you do, I would say journal first.
Journal? Okay. I mean, and that different things are going to work for different people. You know, like that's the other thing too, is like, I like to do collage. Like that's my like new thing for like processing emotions is I make cool collages because I'm so artistic. They're terrible. They're always terrible, but I love them. It's fine. You know, but like that kind of thing, journaling, art, writing, I guess writing is journaling, but you know what I mean?
Yeah. The thing that connects you to your soul, I would recommend doing that and making sure that you're like in a grounded place. Like you want to go into this conversation with somebody, like obviously you're going to be emotional, but you don't want to be at that like height of your emotional capacity while trying to explain to them why you no longer want to be with them.
Yeah, like that emotional dysregulation component.
Yeah. And so, or practicing, like if you have a really close friend that you trust isn't going to just share this with that partner, like talking it out with them first and having them hold the space for you to feel all of those big feelings. Because you don't necessarily want to make your partner receive the news of a breakup and have them hold your feelings in the process. That's not really kind.
Yeah.
If you can be in a space where you are emotionally regulated so that you can hold some space for that person who's going to have some big feelings, and then being open to however they choose to react. Maybe they just leave and they don't want to have a conversation because they need space to process. Maybe they do break down and cry. Like being open to receiving however they react and knowing their reaction isn't necessarily a reflection of you. It's their own emotions that they're going through. And they get to have that emotional experience just like you already have because you made this decision.
Okay, so I'm curious though, I'm going to hit you with a really hard one.
Yeah.
So I'm having this conversation. I'm like, I want the divorce. I want to break up, whatever it might be. I say it very dramatically in this scenario. I don't know why, because we're also on a soap opera, I guess. But so after we say this, like there's that moment where your partner is going to receive that information. They're going to hear that. They're going to have to process that. How do we, as people pleasers, as rejection sensitive people, avoid the impetus to fix and say, oh, no, I'm sorry. I didn't actually mean it. What I actually meant was that I think, like therapy, or like, how do we stick to our guns when we see that there is a person in front of us who is hurting and might feel very negative feelings in that moment? How do we sit with that?
A really practical thing is make sure you have some water or something, so that you take a sip of water after you say it and let them react without saying anything else.
Okay, I'm going to demonstrate that for people who are watching on video. It's going to look like this. You're going to say, actually, Reginald, I want a divorce. While making direct talk. Don't do it like that, please, dear listeners. It's much better if it's a martini glass.
Oh, yeah. But like doing something to make sure that you shut up after you say the thing.
Yeah.
And then take deep breaths. If that's what you need to do, take some deep breaths to regulate your own system. I often say with people that I tend to want to try and fix, they get to have their feelings. They get to have their feelings. They get to have their feelings. That's like kind of the thing that goes on and repeat in my head is like, okay, they're allowed to have their own feelings, and it's not my responsibility to fix it.
That's so hard for me. It's so hard for me to do that. And it's just, I just want everyone to feel okay and good. But it's interesting to me if I reflect, especially like when I'm thinking about past relationships, like how often me wanting everything to be okay and wanting everyone to be okay actually looked like me not having my needs met or my needs served or heard or seen at all. And I just wonder how many people out there feel the same way.
Well, and if you think about moments where you are having some big feelings and someone tried to tell you to stop having those big feelings and how awful it is to be on the other end of that.
Yeah.
Stop crying.
Can you just calm down? Like, no,
yeah.
I can't.
Right. And so trying to placate your partner or say, oh, let me fix it. Like, that's not actually serving them. Like, we are human beings who have human feelings, and that's part of the experience. We kind of get sucked into this, like, positivity trap that we're supposed to be positive and joyful all the time. Like, no, actually, I love crying. This new version of me has learned to embrace the suck in such a beautiful way. It's like, no, actually, I've had a really, like, up and down weekend on the brink of tears, like literally this week on the brink of tears, like every other second. And you know what? It's beautiful. And it's really cool to be able to like hold all of that, because without experiencing the low depths, I don't understand joy. Like we have to have both. And so by trying to comfort or make it easier for the other person, you're actually robbing them of their own experience.
Yeah, it's really powerful. Jess DuBose, this has been an incredible conversation, and I am so grateful for you for coming on. Do you have any last words of wisdom or advice that you can give our dear listeners who might be struggling through this difficult time in their life?
It sucks to be in the process of a breakup or the relationship ending or tension in your relationship. Hear me when I say I honor you in the space that you're in, and it just fucking sucks. You get to be seen and heard and validated in your own feelings too. Just as much as your partner that you're breaking up with, so do you. Find the people in your life that are really good friends that can hold the space for you while you're going through your grieving process, and honor the grieving process. The grieving process is not linear. You're going to have some days where you're spiraling and super sad and depressed, and you're going to have other days where you feel like you're just relieved that it's over or whatever. There is no wrong way to grieve. And there's like different people in your life might have judgments about how you're grieving. It's okay. You get to grieve however you want to and whatever works for you.
Just to tag on to that, dear listeners, a reminder that ADHD brains grieve differently. We process grief in a different way. And especially when you think about our time perception differences and that kind of stuff, like there are so many different ways to move through grief and what grief can look like and feel like. So give yourself grace. Be kind to yourself. Be patient with yourself. Jess DuBose, this has been such a cool conversation. I'm so jazzed that we got to talk to you today. Can you please tell the fine folks listening at home where to find you?
Yeah, you can go to my website, which is jessdubose.com. You can go to Instagram at Coaching with Jess. I'm also on TikTok and LinkedIn and Facebook. You can find all of those things on my website.
And if they wanted to read the fabulous book that you wrote about breaking up with an ADHD partner, what is it called?
It's called I Don't Hate My Ex-Husband, and it's on Amazon.
You should read it. It's so fantastic. I love it. Jess DuBose, thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and your wisdom and that great exercise. I'm going to think about that exercise for like the next 10 years of my life. It's fine. But thank you so much for being here, and we will see you again soon. Thank you for listening. Anything mentioned in the episode will be linked in the show notes with more resources. Have a question, comment, burning story you'd like to share? Email us at sorryimissedthis@understood.org. This show is brought to you by understood.org. Understood is a nonprofit organization dedicated to empowering people with learning and thinking differences like ADHD and dyslexia. If you want to help us continue this work, donate at understood.org/give. Sorry I Missed This is produced and edited by Jessamine Molly and Margie DeSantis. Video is produced by Calvin Kinney. Our theme music was written by Justin D. Wright, who also mixes the show. Ash Beecher is our supervising producer. Brianna Berry is our production director. Neil Drumming is our editorial director. For Understood.org, our executive directors are Laura Key, Scott Koshier, and Seth Melnick. And I'm your host, Kate Osborne. Thank you so much for listening.